Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Strife's Sanctum podcast. My name is Citizen Strife, and this time I'm going to talk about an anime that I rewatched recently. That's Be the Beginning. It was on Netflix about 5 or 6 years ago, a couple of different seasons. I took a break from Netflix for a while. I remember seeing this one when I first had Netflix. And then when I got it back in last year, this was one of the ones that was still on the Netflix queue, and I was like, sure, I'll rewatch it, and I still like it. It's not one of my favorites, but I found myself still liking it for what it was trying to do, and there are some good things and some bad. I would call it like cliche drama pulp, crime drama pulp. You know, there are better forms of this thing in anime and in TV shows and whatnot. The best way I would describe it would be trying to mix a dark crime thriller procedural with supernatural powers and supernatural beings and shit like that. While I think they try to mix the two, I don't think it works the way it's intended. Or maybe that's just how, for me, watching it again and trying to analyze it, it was a few months back, in my memory while rewatching it, because there's a main character I do like, and then there's a main character that I don't really care for. Not that they're bad, just that one side of the show tends to work better than the other, and I kind of wish they would have stuck the landing on the one rather than trying to mix two distinct shows together. First other thing I will mention is the ending theme, The Perfect World. This one is notable specifically for me because I'm a metal guy. The former guitarist for Megadeth, Marty Friedman, who kind of left and then went to Japan and did stuff. Like, he's released albums and whatnot, but I hadn't actually heard him do anything since, 1999. So when I first saw this, I was like, where the hell did this come from? But yeah, he's on the main track of the ending called The Perfect World with Men with a Mission. And I like the song quite a bit. And it's one of those things I like. Sometimes a show may or may not be, amazing, but wanting to see the intro or wanting to see the ending is something that really caps it off and then makes an impression and wants you to kind of stay with it. This is one of those. So listen to the song or watch the OP and then be like, oh, okay, I really want to keep going with this. That kind of vibe there. So oddly enough, first thing to say about the show that was good was a different part of the show, honestly. But the way it works is a facsimile of modern day Italy, or futuristic Italy in this case, where a branch of the military that serves the royal family, called the Royal Investigation Service, that's very straightforward. They are essentially Section 9 from Ghost in the Shell or, the guys in Psychopaths. Covert military or police organizations, stuff like that. They do their thing. So if you've seen them, you know kind of what their job is. They investigate crimes and they do other stuff, and then they find things. The main hook with them is they're not superhuman or super special, or in Psychopath's case, they don't have the dominators and the enforcers and the things like that. It's more just straight-laced crime stuff and police officers and whatnot. But I will say one of the best characters is the main character of the show. And again, it's deuteragonist. Is that the term? The two main character thing? The main character is Keith Flick, voiced by Ray Chase. And his whole thing is he's a superhuman intelligence who just kind of sees things in the kind of Sherlock Holmes kind of way, where you see everything all at once and you can kind of gauge where he's going, and the other police officers just kind of let him do his thing, whether he's unkempt, abrasive, quiet, standoffish, all of those things. He's pretty much playing a riff off the Sherlock Holmes super intelligent, like he sees every single aspect of a case, but he was mired in tragedies and stuff where his sister was killed, and he's been trying to track down that person, but he goes about it the wrong way and has just been kind of like left in the lurch. He's still part of the organization, but not really. So people respect him, but they keep their distance, shit like that. But his whole thing is he's asked to be part of a case that may or may not be related to his former one, which he's still investigating, about this killer bee who's been leaving these symbols, this bee shape, which he decodes as something totally different because he's super smart like that. But for the purposes of the show, other people have been calling it the killer bee and trying to figure out what is this thing. It's different, it's weird, and that's where the second half of the show is. So you have Keith doing his thing, trying to track down a killer from a decade ago, and this other character, Koku, voiced by Kyle McCarley. And Koku's this unassuming guy, works at kind of this antique store, doesn't really do much, but like he's affiliated with Lily Hoshino, who's also part of the Royal Investigation Service, voiced by Faye Mata. Their whole thing is they're related, they're friends, sort of, whatever. I forget. I don't think there's a relation in there. I think it's just she takes care of him or she monitors him, and he honestly takes care of her more, like, because she's a bit of a scatterbrain. But she's the other main character in the story, where she sort of has the thing for Keith, but not really, but sort of, and it builds, but not really. It's like off and on. You don't know, and like she butts in, and he doesn't want her help, but then begrudgingly respects her, skill and all that, and they get to know each other, and then shit goes south, and Lily has to be saved, and shit like that. Because how shows like this go. But Koku's whole thing is he's superhuman. He was, say it with me now, child prodigy, test subject, MacGuffin, superhuman, supervillain, special powers bullshit in a secret institute. Like, we haven't seen that before. You can see why I'm just kind of ignoring this part. Because God forbid we have another secret institute thing, and God forbid we have superhumans. And what I will say is they go about it in an interesting way for what the show's trying to do, but the power sets involved are not very interesting. Like, the setup is your usual secret facility nonsense, and Koku was part of this set of test subject kids where they were trying to like recreate gods and whatever, and turns out Keith was involved, but only ancillary, and like they try to tie it together, but for all intents and purposes it's like two separate things that coexist in the show. They try to make it work. It really doesn't. You're basically saying you're following Keith's story and you're following Koku's story, and they intermingle and they do things and they whatever, but it's two separate stories that they try to mix but doesn't like pan out the way that the show wants it to. Just because I don't think the strength of the twos work well. I don't think a super secret crime drama about a serial killer works well with Secret Institute, whatever. You think it would, but it's kind of like trying to turn Resident Evil into something serious and then realizing that it's a bunch of goofy nonsense about midget Napoleons and weird Spanish zombies. Like, there's a disconnect there. There's only so much realism that can go along, and this is not played for comedy, no, but again, I think they're trying to do two different shows, and I think if you were focusing on one and like Koku was way more like pissed off, or the show was bloodier or something, like it might work. But they play it pretty straightforward. They don't like dig deep into, or at least they try. Like they say, oh, he had a friend in this group called Yuna. She was voiced by Brianna Knickerbocker, and she's fine and all, but she's kind of used as a sort of damsel in distress in this group called Market Maker. And Market Maker's whole thing is they're causing weird crimes. And they're using, like, early on, the crimes are kind of neat. Like, they're disgusting and disturbing and shit, and their motives are weird and unpronounced. But as soon as you start peeling back the layers that it's just a secret society of weird kids trying to get back at people, it's just kind of like, I'm not really feeling it, you know? And then there's this whole thing, like, some of them are superhuman, and some of them are, like, pure superhumans that don't have problems. Others are, like, this half race that are called Reggies that just kind of, like, they're losing their powers, or they can't control them, or they're going nutso. Like, there's so many competing interests in this show that it just kind of falters. Because then you're also wondering, like, what is Koku's power other than kind of, like, turning black and then being able to fly and then avoid a lot of damage? Like, the power sets of the main villains aren't really super impressive. And the fight scenes are fine for what they are, but it does seem like there's something missing. You know, there's something missing, either a panache or a reveling in the absurdity, because I think they try, but it's either not comedic enough to laugh at itself, or it's not gritty enough to just be unabashedly gory and disturbing, whether that's good or bad. It just kind of sits in that weird middle where, like, I like Koku, I like Yuna, they're nice people, but they don't, like, resonate. So the show is really about the crime drama stuff, and whether you like the Royal Investigation Service and Keith and Lily, and I personally like them a lot more, because that's the part I do want to focus on. Is Keith, again, is part of things, and he's, you know, stuck, but also, like, trying to find a way to find the one who killed his, I want to say it was sister. I think it was his sister, and it was either sister or girlfriend or something around there. I don't think it was super gross or anything, so I'm gonna say it was sister. But Keith is, like, confiding in a college friend, Gilbert Ross, and voiced by John DeMita. John DeMita is interesting because he was, like, I heard him in a couple of things in, like, early 2000. Like, he was in Final Fantasy X, for fuck's sake, as one of the Crusader guys, right? That Tidus meets at, like, the beginning of Besaid. That's how far back he goes. And then, like, he's probably done other stuff like theater and whatever, and I hadn't heard him in anime in forever. And then all of a sudden he's in, like, the Somnium Files. There's this dickish guy named Sosajima, and now in this, you know, as Gilbert Ross, and he just plays him, like, really ice cold and just sophisticated, but they're friends, and he's like, you're always serving me shitty coffee. And he's like, no, this is what I always serve you. It's just, they have a weird relationship, and it's like, they're like the two people that, like, know each other and can kind of bat back and forth and be, like, friends, but also, like, combative friends in a way. So it's like, you know, you got one guy as a crime scene investigator dude, detective guy. You got this guy as a forensic doctor who's trying to help him out. And they meet up over coffee. And some of those scenes are interesting because it's like you get to see the human side of Keith more, as opposed to, I'm just a bit of an annoyance. Because there are scenes with Keith and Lily, which Lily's the outgoing, outspoken, just life of the party kind of person. Or she's super serious, but she's an idiot, right? And Keith can't stand her. So obviously they fall for each other to an extent. But those comedic scenes are balanced out by the more serious stuff, you know, talking about the police drama, dealing with the killer bee scenario, you know, sliding in what clues or where, how does Market Maker fit in all this, you know, dealing with all the superhuman stuff. And then I think it's the groundedness. I think it's the groundedness of Keith's character, where it's like you understand immediately where he's coming from, and he's not a complete asshole for no reason, because he's not a complete asshole. Like, there are ways you could have made this not work, and I think it would have sucked. But the way he teeters that line between I don't really want other people's help to I do kind of need your help, but I'm not gonna like go nuts over it. Let me just kind of do my own thing. Versus, oh shit, I'm in trouble. I might actually need some help. But what the fuck are you doing in my office? Like, get out. You know, he has this like human streak to him. So it's like he's the straight man in enough of a comedy that it like lightens the mood, but he centers the show around him because all the weirdness doesn't make sense without him to just understand, okay, I'm seeing this. It's really fucking weird, but I can make sense of it because I'm super smart. He's able to internalize everything from that point of view, and that's why he's my preferred protagonist. Because he has so many layers to him where I don't think Koku really does. I was this guy guilt tripped and I had this incident and, you know, stuff you've seen before. A lot of these machinations and a lot of these scenes and a lot of these things you've seen millions of times before. So when it comes to shows like this, whether it works or not is down to the strength of like what kind of character can you put in that point of view? What kind of character can you have that everything feed off of to where his reactions, and I say this a lot, I don't really care about plot anymore. I care about story and characters intermingling, and I care about whether this character is interesting enough that this, you know, the 5 or 6 different things that can happen to a person. Just think like random number generator. Just pick a thing that happens to them. Oh, okay. They're in this setting with this problem and they're this type of character. Okay. How do you write them? How do they react to the things? How do they bounce off things? That's why I always say in video games I don't like silent protagonists, because nothing happens to them. The game makes you think things are happening to them and wants us to care. No, I want to hear a person's reactions to things. I want them to emote to me. And the nice thing about Keith versus, say, Koku is even though Koku has this like downtrodden story to him, I don't really find him that engaging. Keith and his interactions with other coworkers, with Lily, with Koku himself, whether he's trying to like internalize all of his clues and stuff, whether he's accused of murder, like he has different ways of going about it and different like levels to what I would say is a flat affect, but not flat performance. And that's a good way of describing it. He's not a flat one-dimensional character. There's a lot to him, a lot of weird quirks that they get away with to give him something to work with. I would watch this show, like, would I recommend watching this? Yes and no. There's stuff to like about it, but I can understand if people would bounce off this too. It's trying to be a darker show than it is, and it does have its moments, specifically early. A lot of the early stuff, when you're not really sure what's going on, is kind of neat. But then when they're trying to finish the story, it really comes down to, do you invest in Keith? Do you invest in the villains at all? Not really. Just these face-painted weirdos that are also part of Koku's old group who are being manipulated by whom we don't know, but then we find out and it's kind of like, okay. So again, if you like secret societies and test subjects and finding revenge and, you know, the revenge thriller stuff, that's fine. That's there. I was more gripped by Keith Flick as a person, just on the screen. He wasn't like magnetic. He was just interesting. There is stuff that he would do and ways he would go about talking or interacting with people or interacting in the public that would be awkward, but not out of the realm of possibility for someone weird like this, a weird detective like this. And if you like that kind of Sherlock Holmesian, like, he's strange but in a way that makes sense for him kind of way, then that's kind of the hook you would find. So there's like 2 or 3 competing interests in the show. It's dark enough as a crime thriller to be interesting in that sense. there's an interesting, thought-provoking main character in this side, and then if you like the secret society, revenge thriller, superhuman powers, gonzo weird shit, there's that. It does just enough, I think, in every one of those areas to be good enough without it, like, ascending to amazing territory. I'm sure I've seen a show that's like this that's done better, or 2 or 3 shows that are done better like this. But it's good enough that I think most people would enjoy it if they can get into the setting and the characters enough. But that'll do for today. And if it sounded like I didn't have a lot to say, it's more so that I was talking about what I liked versus what I didn't. So hopefully that made sense as to why certain things of this show would work and then certain things didn't. Because again, I can't be positive all the time. Sometimes I have to be, honest about something that's just like, it's not always there. Like, I see where you're going for, but no. I'm pretty honest that, like, unless something really pissed me off, I don't, like, rail on something. I try to meet it halfway and, like, understand, well, it's what they were going for, but no. Enough of a dismissal just to be like, yeah, no, it didn't work. So this is one of those. Like, I can see what they were going for, and I can see why it would not interest me. Like, if you didn't like this show, I could believe it. I liked it for what it was, and if you liked it, I can also see why you would. So it's one of those, like, good enough that's, like, it's on the good side, but, I could see people bouncing off it for different reasons. Anyway, what's on the docket going forward? Let's find out, shall we? Hooray! I gotta do Danganronpa after this, so I'm happy I did, like, a vocal warm-up of podcasting. Anyway, so I did Be the Beginning, and next week, and 2 weeks later, is Mega Man 5 and Mega Man X5. So, as years go by, I keep going into more Mega Man stuff. It's become a yearly tradition, and I don't really want to stop until I run out of Mega Man games to talk about. Which I probably won't by the time I'm done doing this. Let's see, there's Breath of Fire, the story of Above Average, and one of the best shows of last season was In the Clear Moonlit Dusk. I talked about that show at length over and over and over in the anime rundowns, like the quick rundowns of things, but I didn't dive into why, like, the show itself worked or didn't work. So I always try to pick, if I'm not diving back into my backlog a little bit, I'm trying to find from a season or 2 seasons back, like, what was my favorite? Why was it my favorite? Something like Kowloon or Zenshu, something like that, where last season, I think In the Clear Moonlit Dusk was always good for good entertainment, and I was happy. I think the same thing will happen with, like, Witch Hat Atelier. Like, I want to talk about that at length sometime. But anyway, that'll do for today's episode. I will see you next time. Citizen Strife, signing off.